Welcome back, everybody, to the Laugh Cry Club. This is Joy, Rebecca, and today we have a guest.
Yes.
I think it's been a while since we had a guest, but we'll get to that in 1 second. I just want to say thank you for your patience as we took a week off because I was on vacation. Shame on me for slacking. But this week we're really excited because we have teased this topic and something that just kind of came up naturally on something that we were talking about in a previous episode, which was like the crossover of diet, food, nutrition, and mental health. And I told Rebecca, I was like, well, I know somebody. So welcome to the show, Laura Lygos, aka the Sassy Dietitian. We have known each other for, I want to say, probably at least 10 years now. We met via the CrossFit world when I was doing the CrossFit podcast ages ago. And so we met through that avenue. And then you have been on our podcast a handful of times talking about diet, nutrition. You just have such a very candid, you're like, that's why you call yourself Sassy Dietitian, because you're like, you kind of put it all out there and you have a very straightforward discussion around, especially now, influencers and people that are, and we have done this too with mental health, of like people who are giving mental health advice that really shouldn't be. You're taking the same stance with people who are giving advice around nutrition that shouldn't be. And that's pretty common, I think, with a lot of professions, but really how damaging it can be to people. But why don't you start and back up real quick of giving a brief overview of kind of who you are, how you got into nutrition in the first place. We'll go from there.
Well, thanks for having me. I love that you have another podcast. So I'm Laura. Everyone calls me Sassy. I think I became a dietitian for reasons that didn't become unfolded to me until truly I had my own kids. I think my mom suffered with her own mental health illnesses and eating disorders, and I didn't realize it until she passed away. I also was an athlete, so there were like multiple avenues that brought me to nutrition. And so I think I have a really unique background in the sense that like I was an athlete, I really loved the performance side of nutrition, but then also I had that lens of, I grew up in a family where like we couldn't even have carrots in the house because carrots were bad. And so I also grew up in that almond mom culture, whatever. I became a Division I athlete, wanted to really pursue sports nutrition. And the more and more I got in with sports nutrition, I was in the CrossFit space. That's how I know Joy. I realized that most women were struggling with nutrition, not the elite. I wasn't really working with the elite anymore. I was working with just, the woman who wanted to be healthy. And unfortunately, healthy becomes disordered really quickly. And so I found like my niche was working with women's health, a lot of disordered eating, but then also just like gut health, hormone health, fertility health, women across the life cycle who just, for all intents and purposes, look healthy, and are often dismissed by conventional means because they look healthy. And we have obviously vision in our mind of what healthy is, which is not actually accurate. And so I really have dove into the women's health space and helping women across the life cycle feel better in their body and also I don't have a great phrase for it, but like more food freedom. And that's a sense of like, they're not thinking about food constantly and there's not a lot of rules around food while also actually like feeling better in their body, which is hard to achieve when you're disordered. And yeah, that's kind of like where I've landed. And becoming a mom has also really shaped a lot of my recommendations too, because my food relationship has changed as well as I'm raising kids that I'm trying to completely change the narrative for.
It's interesting from a behavioral standpoint. You and I have talked about this offline before, of just how much food is tied to patterns and behaviors of how you're raised. And I'm sure that just comes up right away. So I'm sure you're going through your education and all of the hours that you've had to put in focusing on the facts and the data and the textbooks that you're studying. And then all of a sudden you're going into working with people who are bringing all this emotional baggage to eating and food. I don't know many people, maybe it's just because I'm in, the fitness space or really talking more about like women and midlife and especially in mental health, that don't have a little bit of baggage around food and eating and the culture that you grew up in around that narrative.
Yeah, and a lot of women don't even recognize it. Like anyone who has an active eating disorder, I do not work with. I understand the complexity of it and the need for an entire care team, but I do work with a lot of women who have this disordered relationship with food, and most of them don't even realize it. Most of them just think that they're bad, that they're not eating good enough, they're not all these things, and we kind of dig into that. I will say, I think I send every single person to a therapist because it's not just about food, not just about the food on your plate, whether it's good or bad, and it's never good or bad, right? There's no moral value around food. And a lot of people don't even realize. A lot of times they'll say like, whose voice is that? Who told you that this food is bad? Who told you that you're bad? A lot of times it does stem from childhood of, another pattern we see is like the clean plate club, right? Like people don't have a good gauge on when to stop, because there's kids that are hungry somewhere and they were told that from a very young age. And so they just clean their plate and they don't even realize that it's, broaching on disordered and affecting the way in which they're feeding themselves and showing up for themselves.
I think that makes sense. I think we all shook our heads of when you talked about there's starving children somewhere else, so clean your food. So I think we're probably all in that age category and group. I also think it's great that you're sending people to a therapist, a mental health therapist, because I think when I look at food patterns, as far as from my mental health perspective as a therapist, we're using food as a coping strategy, right? And you were talking about it's not bad or we shouldn't label our foods. It's food. And there are foods that have certain nutritional levels or parts to it, and there are foods that have zero nutrition. And we are in this world of where we have to choose. And at this point in our lives, like if you look way back in the day, people were gardening. You ate what you could grow or resource. But now I can go buy some candy or some food package that was manufactured somewhere, and it's just so convenient. But I think this convenience factor has led to poor eating habits, and that it's really become a coping skill. It's like, I liken it to like a drug habit sometimes, especially sugar. I have my own issues around sugar. We can talk about that later, but it's just like I reach for it to regulate.
Something that I've heard too I have a friend who works in eating disorder communities, and she said a lot of times too, different textures can create some type of regulation. And so I've noticed that pattern, especially in a lot of more like of my neurodivergent clients, that they seek some type of crunch. I'm so thankful for I have such a broad collaborative of colleagues that I've learned so much from, that these are patterns I never would have recognized 10 years ago. Calling that out for a lot of clients is helpful of it's not that the crunch is bad, it's not that the candy is bad, but if we start recognizing why we're reaching for them, and then also understand if you're really hungry, of course that food's going to be more desirable because you're hungry and it's easy and there's less barriers and more reward. And so it's working with that of it's not bad that you're doing that. It's how do we help you so that, we just eat candy, we're going to crash an hour later and we're not going to feel good. And then if we don't feel good, it's going to be hard to do things and be happy and all the different things. So it's interesting all the patterns I've recognized. And I love working with mental health therapists because we just see things from a different lens, and it really helps, I think, draw a circle for this client of understanding those patterns as opposed to putting into silos of well, you're bad and you have a mental health disease and whatever. It's no, you're just human and you're coping in a different way, and you might be doing that because there is true hunger underneath all of that.
And pointing out the history and patterns of behavior, that is not something you can think your way out of easily. The idea is I'm going to see a dietitian to help me, whatever goals that you might have. You cannot separate the patterns that you bring to the table, and this goes with anything related to mental health. But I think the idea of us being okay, I got to dial in my nutrition. What I hear is okay, so where does this start? Does this start from when you were 5 years old or 6 years old and your parents are telling you kind of what we've mentioned of you got to clean your plate or you have to eat A, B, and C? And there's no blame here. It's just recognizing that these are the things that create these patterns of behavior that is just hard. You cannot just turn it off by being I'm going to eat A, B, and C, because that comes with so much emotion. Sometimes it brings up more, you may be like you said, talking with someone, and then all these other things start to come out pretty quickly. And I don't know anything. I can't off the top of my head think of something else where it's kind of a quote unquote arbitrary thing where it's oh, I just need to, do this to kind of stay alive throughout the day, that doesn't come with such baggage. So it's not like you're saying, oh, we're going to, go wallpaper a wall, and everyone's I have baggage around wallpaper. This is something you have such a tie to growing up because of how we're raised, and the culture that we're in, unfortunately, does not serve us. And, myself thinking as a little girl or teenage girl in her room reading 17 magazine, being I want to look like all these thin models, and thinking that was the norm, and not understanding how bodies work and that how your body is shaped is how your body is shaped, and that I will not have the waist size of whatever the standard is because my body's not shaped like that. These are all things that I think people hopefully can start to really connect disconnect, if they're not already, of giving themselves a break.
And unfortunately, I think we're back there. We're back to skinny.
I'm really sad about that. I was just going to go into that, like with the GLPs. So do you want to kind of touch on that? It's probably a really nuanced topic, but I know you talk about this a lot on your Instagram, which of course is Sassy Dietitian. I know you have thoughts. What are they?
It's so nuanced, and we have learned some really great things about the GLP-1s and the GIP-1s, all different types of peptides for the body, and there are benefits, so I don't want to negate them. The problem is that we have once again dove down the thin is healthy rabbit hole, and we are praising bodies that achieve a certain amount of thinness, and we're seeing that, first and foremost in Hollywood, right? I mean, you look at like Ariana Grande and a bunch of other actresses that are front and center, and it's scary, it's terrifying, because thinness does not equal health. We know that there's a lot of implications, heart health, bone health, mental health that go along with that, and so we're trying to achieve a body type that is not actually healthy, and we're putting that on a pedestal. And then we have, unfortunately, a lot of providers who see people struggling with their weight and they're just given a GLP-1 without a lot of instruction. I mean, there's a lot of I think a patient should have to know what the patient has an eating disorder background or disordered behavior background, because you're just literally handing them something that could create more disorder and more body dysmorphia. So I just think it's being overprescribed and under-supported. And I don't think that it shouldn't be on the market. I don't think people shouldn't use it, because I do think, there's even some research around addiction and how it can help there, but I just think it's not being used appropriately. And now, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but the fitness world has gotten into it.
Oh, yeah.
And there's like an MLM market for it. Mm-hmm. And so even like fitness professionals have been coming out and being like, oh, I'm on a peptide. And so all of a sudden, I'm like, what? You were just promoting your program, and now that's not even how you achieved that body. And people are following you and trusting you and liking you and wanting to achieve the same body, and they have to do it through it's an expensive route. I mean, we're talking a couple $100 a month to maintain these peptides that are kind of like, they're calling it the gray market now. It's not the black market because it's legal and you can get it, but it's coming from people who really shouldn't be prescribing it to you and don't know, like they're not checking for eating disorders, they're not looking for disordered behavior, and they're not looking at the foundations, right? Like most people aren't taking care of themselves with the basics. They're not drinking enough water. They're not going outside and moving their body. They're not eating enough protein. They're not doing the basics. Right. And so we're basically like putting a Band-Aid over a fire hose that hasn't been, supported.
So how are these influencers able to prescribe something what is the model that they're making money off of this? This feels so scary.
It's an MLM. So I looked into this because I saw another provider that I like and trust using it. And it's LEMD is the major one that I've seen. It's like an elephant logo, if you've seen it. It's basically like I have a code or an account and I can recommend, X, Y, and Z, but a doctor writes off on it. I don't know how. This is why it's called the gray market, because no one really knows how this is legal or why, or maybe it shouldn't be legal.
I'm so glad we're talking about this, because I know a gym I used to go to that I'm not going to anymore. I've seen and heard that they are kind of peddling GLP-1s or the peptides now. And I'm like, how are they doing it? Because he's a certified trainer and the owner. But I'm like, who is this person that apparently is prescribing it to? Our society gets into like, let's be, we want to be fit. We want to be thin diet culture, and it's like we want it immediately. And GLP-1s are pretty effective immediately for people. There are long-term possibly concerns that we don't yet know about. I don't know if you know, or if there are certain concerns that you might have about the kind of these long-term mass effects of this prescribing.
Well, I think the problem is we don't know. Right?
Okay.
That to me, that's a big unknown. And I don't think that's a reason to not trust the science, but I do think it's, put up some caution of like, not everyone should be on these. And I can't tell you how many people I've heard recommended these when they don't have the foundations or the support, right? Like, I think Joy had mentioned, like a dietitian is not just someone who hands out a meal plan. We're supporting the whole person, and we're understanding not just like what you're eating, but how you're eating, why you're eating, what you're thinking about when you're eating. And most people don't have that support. They're just given, and unfortunately, unfortunately, if you're going through your doctor, insurance only covers a therapeutic dose. So you have to be on a certain minimal level where a lot of people, that's too much for them. And so I think people, it's also being overdosed. We're seeing some digestive issues, which I know that was like a topic we wanted to discuss too, of that like gut-brain connection. And so it's also impacting motility. So the way in which your food moves through your digestive system, and that can impact a lot of different things in your gut. Slowing down digestion when it's not meant to be slowed down can cause things like gastroparesis, which is basically the slowed emptying of your stomach, which is really uncomfortable. It can lead to possible like overgrowth in the intestine because if food's not moving through appropriately, it kind of like sits there and ferments. Some people have the opposite. They have like diarrhea, and that can, if you have long-term diarrhea, that can lead to poor absorption of nutrients, which leads to malnutrition regardless of body size. So I just think that there's a lot of things that haven't been addressed. And once again, it's like putting thinness above everything else. And so people get praised, and you guys probably see this all the time, they get praised for their body size and shape and their weight all the time. And so and I'm sure you struggle with this too, I've created ways for people to like celebrate what we would call like non-scale victories, because people think that weight equates to health. So the second they walk into their doctor's office, right, what's the first thing that happens?
Yeah, wait.
Yeah, like everyone knows
hate
this.
It. I'm can I take my shoes off?
I know,
my
refuse
pants,
it.
The jacket.
I say like, I don't want to be treated based on my weight. And I often, they'll be like, oh my God, you lost the baby weight. And I'm like, yeah, and I have anxiety through the roof. Like, you're now just going to look at me and say your body is great, but you're going to ignore me because I look a normal body size. So anyway, I think we also, like, I see that run rampant in my practice of women just say, well, I haven't lost weight. I say, yeah, but you're now pooping regularly, which like, hallelujah, right? Like everyone feels better when they're pooping. Yep. Their mental health is better. They're sleeping better. You know, they have a higher libido. They actually enjoy their family. Like all those things I think matter so much more than weight. But now it's like the GLP-1s, I feel like we were getting there. I feel like we were progressing there. And then the GLP-1s hit the market and it just sent us back decades.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that is something that I've seen. I definitely don't want to throw everything out and say it's bad. Like you said, I always appreciate that you're like, everything's nuanced, but we have to really be educated consumers and not fall into the trap of the magic pill is going to make our lives happy and solve all our problems. I will constantly reference the movie The Substance. Have you seen it yet?
No.
Rebecca, you've seen it.
Yes.
Laura, it's basically, and listeners out there, a little bit of a spoiler alert, but it is a really good movie that will validate what we're doing to ourselves right now. It's basically a movie about like the obsession with beauty, and Demi Moore's in it, and it's a very weird sci-fi movie, so just be prepared going into it. It's kind of weird.
It is.
But it's really, the message is, I can't stop thinking about that movie because of where we're at right now. It was almost like this artist had an epiphany of what we're going to be doing to ourselves, because I think this movie came out like 2 or 3 years ago before. I mean, we were starting to go there with the GLP-1s, but I think now, do you say GLP? How do you reference this? Because how do you encapsulate all of these drugs?
Now, I feel like you could just say peptides,
okay, peptides.
Because there's even more than GLP-1s. Okay. We could go down that rabbit hole.
Because I was like, I feel like there's just so much more out there. But the movie is basically this overall message of all the things that we do for beauty essentially destroys you. I can't stop thinking about this movie for that reason, because I can't help but think, it's N equals 1, I get it on some scenarios, but like I have a friend who is losing all their hair because they're on a GLP. And
that's not N equals 1, that's very common.
Is it? Like a lot of hair, like disturbing. And so now they're on, what's the drug you take? Minoxidil,
something. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's minoxidil.
Yes, something like that.
like the Rogaine type of thing. And so, and so I'm like, to what end? And then I've heard other stories of like, okay, this person lost all this weight, and then they had to do Botox because their face was all weird because of the. I'm like, and so it's The Substance. You guys watch that movie, and maybe that will like click something for all of us that like we're a snake eating its own tail. Like we are just destroying ourselves at what cost?
For what?
For what?
Right.
For what?
You know, I also want to say, and I think this is kind of what we're all saying, is that you have to kind of buyer beware. I think these peptides can be very helpful for some people, as long as you have a care team that is, your doctor is well aware, like, is there an eating disorder background here? You're probably seeing a therapist. You're hopefully seeing a registered dietitian, because it can be very helpful for some patients that are like, I have exercise forever. I feel like I'm doing everything I need to, but I can't shed this weight. And it might be a weight where it might be an unhealthy weight because it's like leading to, I might need to have a knee surgery or something like that. And that I think in those cases it can be really helpful. But it's important that you have a doctor that you trust and you have a dietitian you're working with, because this is really something that could like catapult and change your life. But the GL or the peptides won't sustain it for you, right? It's like once you stop, it all comes back. And so part of it could be like it helps you get started on your journey and you learn how to eat appropriately and the things you need to fuel your body. So I think it can be helpful for some people as long as it's, you have a care team.
And I think that's the issue.
Yeah.
Is that most don't. And now we're seeing that happen in conventional medicine where doctors just prescribing it. And I see it prescribed like wrongly. A client goes in and complains of anxiety and they're handed a GLP-1.
Wow.
It's so bad. I've seen people go to their OBGYN and just say, I'm having menstrual cycle issues, and they're given a prescription for a GLP-1. Yep. And it's like, I understand that like it could have benefits for that person, but that person came to you complaining about a completely different issue that also needs to be addressed, regardless of if weight needed to be addressed too. And that's really where I get stuck. And I'm like, it's not being used appropriately. And now we're seeing in the fitness space and people are trying to like, get a six pack again. And I'm like, at what cost? Like, I don't know if you've seen that reel of it's like, well, Ozempic is trending now, but osteoporosis is going to trend in 20 years. Yep. And it's like, I've told every client who's ever gone on a GLP-1, I'm like, you need to get a DEXA scan right now. And then you need to track that every 5 years minimally, because regardless of how you lose weight, whether it's naturally or through a GLP-1 or other means, we also run the risk of losing muscle mass. And we know that even if you were to do it through diet and lifestyle, that can happen as well. So not blaming the drug, but if you're not eating enough protein and you're not moving enough weight, then it's very likely. And if you catch it too late, it's not reversible. Right. And we know that, I don't know if you, what's her name? I'll think of her name, but there's a doctor who's been really pushing this in the perimenopause and menopause space of hip fractures. Or
Dr. Stacy Sims?
No, there's another one.
Okay.
She pushes a lot of this too, but there's another doctor. She talks a lot about this of like hip fractures are like a leading cause in female deaths, because if you don't have the bone structure, and this is like, menopause age, but like, you can't get out of bed, you can't take care of yourself after a fall because you don't have the means in which to heal. Like it can be like life or death. And so osteoporosis is not something to just say, oh, it's no big deal about.
Is it Vonda Wright?
Yes.
Okay. Vonda Wright. I don't know her. I want to shift us a second to, I'm just curious, we all hear about you are what you eat. And I think most of us know there is a gut-mind connection. Can you maybe speak a little bit more about that and why, like, what we're putting into our mouths really affects our brain, and which also then affects like our moods, mental health? Mm-hmm.
I love this topic. I could nerd out about this all day. And this is where like, it's so hard to say we're working on not restricting food and we're also working on prioritizing food, like certain quality foods, because food does impact health. It's not to say that it doesn't, but we also need to not put food on a pedestal and become, we venture down that orthorexic rabbit hole. But we have a bidirectional relationship between brain and gut. It's called the gut-brain axis. And this is not like a woo-woo term. Like you can go on Harvard and Stanford Medical and you can read really cool articles about it. And there's literally, I think it's called the enteric nervous system. We have outside of our brain, we have the most nerve cells in our gut lining. So we literally have like a second brain in our gut, which is wild. And so what we eat does impact how we feel. And we also know that we produce almost 90% of our serotonin, our feel-good neurotransmitter, in our gut. And so when I see someone tell me they have anxiety and depression, I obviously don't say like, come off your meds. Like you need your meds, you need your mental health therapist, like you need to be working on all of that. And also that tells me that there's probably a gut component to it as well. And that could be from food quality. I see a lot of times that it's also related to food quantity, right? A lot of my clients come to me and they're not necessarily under eating, but they are miseating. So like they're waiting till the end of the day to eat, they're skipping meals, they're trying to diet and then they can't because they're hungry, and so they're binge restricting, that type of stuff, and that can impact it. So really the quality of food can impact overall brain health, and not to mention your brain health can impact your gut health. So, some people, I'll ask people like where digestion starts, and everyone's like the stomach, and I'm like, nope, think further up. And eventually they'll get to the mouth, and I say, nope, it starts in the brain. Like if I say the word, probably the right crowd, warhead, you start puckering. You literally start like salivating because your brain is like, I know what a warhead is.
It literally just happened to me. I was like, ooh.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's so cool.
Get you.
And we live in a society where it's go, 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 constant distraction, right? Most people, I'm literally working on my like first meeting of like, how do you eat? Are you distracted? Are you a mom who's prepping a meal for a kid and not sitting down? Are you eating in the car? Are you working through your lunch? That can impact how digestion works, because literally we have to think about the food. We think about the food. That's why you see people pray before eating. Like that wasn't unintentional, right? It was bringing that mindfulness to the meal. And then you have to go from there. You have to chew your food. And there's a lot of other steps that get there. But we start there. That helps with digestion. And then that digestion can work better, which then helps with that serotonin production and that nervous system, which is crazy.
I remember you and I talked ages ago. And don't you love when someone repeats back to you something you said and you're like, oh my gosh, you remembered? Because I remember you were like, one of your major taglines at the time was like, slow your roll. Like slow down and eat.
I haven't said that in so long.
And
yes.
And it's hard for us as Americans to slow down and actually eat our meals and put intention into our meals. Coming back from a Peru vacation, that's exactly what you do before every vacation. That's what you do before every meal is you pause and you are grateful for the food that you have. I'm not saying that like everyone under the sun needs to do that for every single meal, but at least just be mindful. That's where we've talked a lot about mindfulness on this show recently, because I'm kind of diving into that world and doing some education around it. But one of the practices they do, you probably have heard of this too, Laura, is like the raisin exercise, where you may have done this with clients, where you just like sit and they hold their food and they smell their food. You use all your senses to get someone used to just like not shoving it down your trap. You know what I mean? And so you think it's just like you eat something, your stomach processes it. But like what you said about the brain, starting in the brain of just having the thought around it and how that affects your system immediately is proof right there that when we talk about if you're upset and you're in grief and you're sad and you're not hungry, like those emotions are causing you to like not have a hunger cue. So all of that is just really important, I think, for people to be reminded of. And it's just so much beyond like what's on your plate, like you said before.
And so many people come to me. I work with a lot of moms, and they come to me and they have, when I ask them if they're hunger or they've noticed hunger before a meal and they notice when they're satisfied, most of them say no. They say, what do you mean? And I say, well, let's start a journal. I want you to start thinking about like, how do you feel before a meal? How do you feel after a meal? And they'll come back to me, they're like, I don't know what to write. And I'm like, yeah, because you've spent so much time detached from mealtime for many reasons, right? From being busy to maybe it not feeling safe because of like what we talked about, right? Of like, you had an almond mom. Like I had a mom who told me that carrots weren't healthy, right? Like you have all these like other beliefs that come to you. So sitting down at a mealtime doesn't feel safe. Or like, you probably see this too, of like people need to be productive all the time. And so a meal feels like it's taking away from that of like, well, if I could just work through lunch, right? If I could just eat this in the car, then I could cut out time, but they also are bloated and have heartburn and anxiety and don't sleep well and all the things. And it's like, well, let's start there, right? That's such like an not easy. It's a hard place, but a simple place to start of like slowing down at meal times, chewing our food. Like you don't have teeth anywhere else in your body. They're there to help actually chew your food. And we can start doing that. We actually start seeing a lot of improvements right away with people.
So speaking on kind of some of these habits that you go into as a dietitian, what else are the things that you're looking for that maybe some listeners can kind of start to think about themselves that could kind of go across like just being mindful of eating or just slowing down and sitting while you're eating versus being on the go? Is there anything else that's kind of like could help contribute to the overall health or mental health of someone?
Oh my God, so many things. When it comes to digestion, another thing I see is that people chug water at meal times. I'm not saying don't drink water, because people think in extremes.
Yeah.
So they hear like,
Yeah.
oh, don't drink. And I'm like, no, you can drink. But think about having a glass of water versus chugging your entire water bottle that's been sitting on your desk all day untouched. When we do that, we can dilute our stomach acid. And stomach acid, as we age, and I know you like talk more about like midlife women as well, stomach acid naturally declines. It's actually something I remember learning in school and being like, well, that's not something I have to worry about. And now I talk about it literally every day. And ways to improve that naturally are exactly what we talked about: thinking about your food, being mindful, chewing your food, not diluting your stomach acid. So not chugging water throughout a meal, just using it as sips to help break down the food. That can be really helpful for a lot of people. Another thing is honestly just like, this is hard, and this is where I use a lot of like journaling for clients, but like, how are you talking about food? How are you thinking about food? Like I hear it so readily because I'm on the other side and I'm, not as biased. And I just hear like, oh, well, I was bad today because I ate a cookie with lunch, or I'm going to do better tomorrow. I was just so bad today. And like learning, like, what am I saying about myself? And like, what would a friend say? If a friend said I ate a cookie and I'm bad, would you ever like be like, yeah, you're so bad? Like you would never say that. You'd be like, what are you talking about? So even just like the way we're talking about food often influences, and usually it's not talking out loud, right? It's like that internal dialogue can impact how we show up for food. And it creates that like black or white, all or nothing, binge restrict cycle that we see often. And that's when people don't feel good, because it can also impact blood sugar. It can impact energy, sleep, everything. And so just thinking about, sometimes I say like, just jot it down or say it out loud if you think it. And when they start doing that, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe how many times a day I say I'm bad, or like, this food is bad, when really like, what were my alternatives, right? Like I didn't cook lunch, so I had to go out to eat. Okay, great. I'm so glad that I was able to eat something today. And just flipping that can really take that like good versus bad food off the plate.
That's a great point. So it sounds like what you're saying is, if I'm busy at work and I'm like, I didn't have a chance to think and pack my meal that would be healthy, and I have to go out and eat, it's better for me just to go out and eat that lunch than to skip it.
Yes.
Okay.
Skipping meals creates such havoc for people, and people think they're doing themselves a favor, because in that scenario, right, like, oh, well, I can only go eat a sandwich, God forbid, right, and some chips. Okay, yeah, and there's probably some protein and some fiber in there, and you're going to help with that blood sugar balance, which blood sugar is its whole topic, and that can impact how you feel. If you skip that lunch, what's going to happen? You're probably going to crash. You're probably going to get home. When you get home, you're going to eat everything that's not tied down. You're not going to feel good, and then you're going to go into a shame spiral, right? Like nothing good comes of that. Whereas if you actually fed yourself, even if it's not the quote unquote ideal food, chances are you're not going to have that crash or that slump. You're going to get home and feel more regulated and not feel like you have to, eat everything that's not bolted down. And then you actually can enjoy your dinner and continue on. And I think once we label it as like, oh, it's bad to eat out. No, it's not bad. And also like, if you don't feel good, I try to like reframe that too. If a food doesn't make you feel good, that's different than it being good or bad, right?
That's
like,
a really good comment.
I don't feel good when I eat McDonald's. I don't label McDonald's as bad. I just know if I eat it, I don't feel good.
But like the same thing with like eggplant. I don't like, it doesn't sit well in my stomach ever. So I don't eat it.
Right.
Like,
it doesn't have to be fast food.
But
right. It could be anything.
It's a pretty good food for people, but like my stomach doesn't love it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I
and
think that's where you have to pay attention, right?
Yes. And a lot of people aren't, right? And because we're so busy, and it also, once again, feels scary for some people to pay attention because, then it's like, oh, well, am I the problem? No, you're not the problem. Maybe you weren't taught how to eat. I wasn't taught how to eat.
Yeah.
I was taught that food was good or bad. I was taught that I had to clean my plate. Mm-hmm. And I'm hopeful that a lot of people in our generation are changing that narrative for their kids. I see it all the time, and I'm working on it myself. And I love my in-laws, but sometimes they say things and I'm like, we don't say that in our house. And I think I say that so many times, and they're not doing it intentionally. That's just like, they don't even realize they're saying it.
Yes, it's so second nature. It's automatic. Think of how much brain space we are using to navigate and control food.
I mean, I tell all my clients who have kids or kids around them, I'm like, watch a young kid eat. It is so cool to watch. My kids leave food on their plate all the time. And sometimes they leave the dessert on the plate. And it's so cool to see. And sometimes they don't touch the fruit and vegetables and they only eat the dessert. And it's so cool to just watch them and let them like navigate it all. And that's probably one of the hardest moments of parenthood that I had to learn, of like, you just sit on your hands. You're offering them the food and they get to decide what and how much they're actually going to consume of the food that you present to them. And it is so cool to see that intuition of just like, they're just listening. They're not thinking of it as good or bad. They're not thinking that they have to finish their plate. They just eat. And my oldest is now 5 and we talk through, he's like asked this morning, he goes, Mommy, what's the best food to put in your body? And I was like, well, what do you think, bud? And he's like, protein. And I was like, what?
Spoken like a dietitian's child.
Yes. I was like, what 5-year-old says that?
Right.
I was like, well, let's talk about, I was like, yeah, protein fills you up and it helps with your muscles and keeps you strong. I said, but there's other foods too. And we just like talk through food like it's food.
Like it's
not
food. Like it's a neutral
it's not
object.
Good or bad.
Yep. It's
Yeah.
a neutral object.
Yeah.
And you posted videos of Connor when he was younger. I remember you would post the meals that he would eat, and it was so cute. First of all, like his little fingers feeding himself, but it was always so joyful to watch because it was that same vibe of like just this freedom and this carefree listening to their body. There's no judgment around, oh, I shouldn't eat all these blueberries, Mom. It was just like, I loved those videos, and I always would tell you that. I'm like, it's just so joyful to watch this. And I know as we grow and mature, things become more complex in our minds, and that's, something that we really can't escape, and we can work through it and we can be aware of it. So I'm really glad that we're having this discussion today. I feel like we could talk for another, 10 years, but kind of wrapping up the discussion on, what we've covered today. Is there anything else that someone who maybe has like no experience with a dietitian or doesn't know where to start, what are the avenues they might go to find someone that they could potentially work with?
That's so hard. Not every dietitian is a good dietitian. I wish I could say that they were, but
same.
I can say that I've been to a couple.
it's unfortunate. But I mean, like, not everyone who cuts your hair is going to be a good hairdresser, right? So it's like, and it's hard. It's kind of like finding a therapist of like, sometimes you have to go through a couple, and that's really hard when you're struggling, because it's like the last thing you want to do is retell your story and have to, it's hard. So honestly, I think the best, and I think we've gotten so far from this because of, I think, COVID, unfortunately, and the internet, is that we've stopped like relying on our community. And if you can ask friends of like, does anyone know? Like, I think some of my best referrals are from my past clients because they get a really good feel of what they gained from working with me. No client comes to me and gets a meal plan. They come to me and we talk about relationship with food. We work on gut health. We're working on blood sugar health. We look at labs through a different lens. And so, I think it's helpful if you can't find someone who's worked with a dietitian, you can always ask that dietitian, like, would you mind putting me in contact with someone who did work with you? Do you have testimonials? Like, I think that's all fair too. And then also understanding, like, what's your goal, right? Like, do you have disordered eating? It's okay. Most people do. I did. And like, is that something that they focus on? And you can ask that. Like, if someone comes to me and says, hey, I have an eating disorder, I say, I'm so sorry. Here are the 2 dietitians that I absolutely love. And I think you'd work really well with them. And that's, people send people to me because they know I work really well with gut health and fertility health. And so it's also sometimes just saying, these are the things that I really want to work on, which I understand is hard. It's hard to advocate for yourself, especially when you're in a vulnerable position. But ask questions. A good dietitian will answer those questions. Ask your community, and then follow some good ones online. I think the internet's a double-edged sword because there's some really bad follows. Yeah. But following, some good dietitians, there's so many out there that are great. I should put a list together because I feel like there's some really great ones that you can learn a lot from just from following them. Mm-hmm. And also, a lot of people have told me, they're like, I only follow like you and like these 5 people, and my mental health has shifted around food because I'm no longer being fed the like important. What I eat in a day and like the grocery store list of like, this is what you should or shouldn't eat, right? Like, so filling your feed up with more of that, like food freedom, positivity, all of that can be helpful as well.
Yeah, that's really good. And I'll link all of your socials and your website here. And if people want to reach out to you and ask questions, I'm sure, you're willing to support people in just like guiding people where to go to. But it's something that is not super common to be referred in our healthcare system, and it's not
So
always the
annoying.
most support, but it's so important. And just something as simple as taking away what you're seeing every day on your social media feed. And I think we're all very susceptible to, I can't remember what I saw recently, but the old belief systems will pop in every once in a while. It'll be like, should I be doing this plan or should I be? And I'm like, no. And I remember when I got, when was it? It was like a couple years ago when I went to my new PCP because I started HRT because my hormones were all over the place. And they were like, yeah, you probably do really well on, eliminating gluten and dairy. And I remember when I posted something about that, you were like, it's not all black and white. Just remember, it's not all black and white. And I was like, thank you for that, because we want to do black or white. We want to be like, I have to go all in because I want to take charge of my health. And guess what? It's fine. Like I'm doing okay. And so that's just such a good reminder to all of us too, of we are set up to fail really in the culture that we're in. So we have to be extra careful to make sure we're taking care of ourselves and advocating for ourselves.
Preach.
I feel like we need to have a follow-up
Anytime.
time with you
I
if
know.
you would like to come back,
Yes.
because I have so many questions and this has been so informative, and I just love to hear more from you. So maybe we'll have you back in the near future.
Yeah, I
Sounds
feel like
good.
we just
Always
scratched
happy
the
to.
surface of Laura's
did,
brain. Laura
'cause-
has so much knowledge in there that we really should have a part 2. So listeners, if you have additional questions you'd love us to talk about on this
Yes.
show, and with Laura, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us laughcryclub@gmail.com, and we're on social at the same. Laugh Cry Club, and then the Sassy Dietitian is Laura's website. You can find all the information, services, resources, recipe articles. You have cookbooks, you've got podcast episodes, you've done all the things. So we just so appreciate your time today, and I always love talking to you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it too.
All right, we'll see you
All
next
right.
week, everybody. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.